Welcome to Backbone Unlimited. My name is Matt Hartsky. In this episode, we're going to talk about the real reason a lot of hunters are struggling to kill elk. This is for the hunter who is putting in real effort and still not getting it done. Not the lazy guy, not the road hunter, not the once a year hunter. I'm talking about the one who trains, hikes, scouts, listens, learns, and still walks out of the mountains frustrated. Because here's the truth: you can do a lot of things right and still stay stuck if your foundation is off. If you're not familiar with who I am, I've been hunting and guiding Western big game for over 34 years, and I've been a professional strength conditioning and nutrition coach for more than 30 years, and I'm here to help you become a more successful and consistent elk hunter and outdoorsman. Most elk hunters think they need better tactics, maybe more aggression, maybe better calling or more miles, but that's not the real problem. The real problem is this: you're building your hunt around a moment or moments instead of building a system. And until that changes, the results won't either. In this episode, I'm going to show you exactly where that disconnect is happening and how to fix it. You're not losing to elk, you're losing to bad diagnosis. Most hunters think they know why they're struggling. They believe they're not covering enough country. They think their calling isn't good enough. They assume they need better gear, or they chalk it up to bad luck and missed timing. I talk to a lot of hunters, and those are typically the reasons they feel they're unsuccessful. But those are surface level explanations. Those are the symptoms, not the cause. Because here's what actually happens when you misdiagnose the problem: every fix you apply pulls you further in the wrong direction. You move more, you call more, you push harder, and you react faster, but none of it necessarily improves your consistency. It just makes your hunt more chaotic. You're not losing because elk are too smart. You're losing because your approach is built on reaction instead of understanding. Most elk hunters are hunting emotionally, right? They hunt urgency. They chase opportunity when it shows up in front of them. But elk don't live that way. They live inside patterns. They rely on terrain. They use the wind. They move with purpose and predictability. And until your approach matches that, you're always going to feel like you're just one step behind. You're chasing elk instead of hunting how elk live. Elk are not randomly scattered targets across the mountain, right? They live inside a system. Every day is built around survival: feeding, security, thermals, bedding, efficient travel, escape routes, and their response to pressure. That system doesn't change just because it's hunting season. If anything, it becomes more refined. But most elk hunters don't hunt that system. They hunt moments. A bugle sounds off and they react. They cut a fresh track and they follow. They glass a bull and they make a move. And by the time those things happen, a lot of times you're already too late. They're stepping into the middle of something that's already in motion instead of being positioned for where it's going by understanding elk behavior. And that's why it feels like elk are always one step ahead, because they are. If you only hunt what elk are doing in front of you, you will always be reacting. You will always be trying to catch up. Successful elk hunters don't do that. They hunt the structure that creates elk movement before elk ever show up. And that's where everything starts to change. You're hunting good looking country instead of currently usable country. A lot of elk hunters are in beautiful country, and that's exactly the problem, because not all good looking country is good right now. And there's a big difference between map pretty country and historically good country, and country that actually supports elk under current conditions. Map pretty country is what looks right on OnX or Google Earth: north facing timber, big basins, dark pockets, classic features. Historically good country is where elk used to be, where you've seen them before, or where you've heard stories about consistent action, maybe even where you've killed one. But currently usable country is different. That's where elk are today, based on pressure, weather, moisture, feed, and how accessible the area is to other hunters. And most elk hunters never make that distinction. They simply stay in places that should hold elk, but might not anymore, or at least not during daylight, not under pressure, or not in ways that are huntable. So they keep grinding empty or low probability areas, thinking effort is eventually going to pay off. But elk distribution matters more than elk numbers. If elk aren't using that piece of ground the way you think they are, it doesn't matter how good it looks, right? You're hunting a dead zone. Hey, If you hunt public land elk and you're tired of grinding through random seasons, I built the elk hunting series of ebooks for you. Most hunters don't struggle because they lack effort. They struggle because they lack a system. And that's exactly why I built the elk hunting ebook series as a complete progressive framework for Western elk hunters who are done guessing and ready to hunt with intention. Volume 1 is going to be Foundations and Reality. I reset your mindset and expose the assumptions that quietly wreck seasons. In Volume 2, Finding Elk and Understanding Pressure, you'll learn how elk actually move under pressure so you can anticipate instead of react. In Volume 3, Terrain, Wind, and Position, I break down how to use landscape and thermals to consistently create opportunities. In Volume 4, Calling, Silence, and Pressure, sound becomes a decision tool, not an impulse. In Volume 5, Bow Hunting Execution, we're talking about close range strategy so you can finish your encounters. And in Volume 6, Late Season and Post Rut, we're talking about how elk shift after the rut and how to adapt when others quit. This is a system built for consistency. This isn't theory, it's a structured system to help you find elk, read country, and make confident decisions every season. Buy each volume individually or bundle them all to save 50% off at backboneunlimited.com. You're too predictable in a world where elk are adapting. Most elk hunters don't realize how predictable they are. They use the same trailheads, they glass from the same knobs, they hunt the same ridges at the same times a day. They follow the same assumptions year after year and they expect different results. Meanwhile, elk are adapting. They're responding to roads, pressure, noise, and human movement. They shift where they feed, they tighten where they bed, they adjust when they move. And in a lot of cases, they don't leave the area, they just use it differently. And that's the part that a lot of elk hunters miss. This isn't about necessarily going deeper, and it's not about hiking further or suffering more, even though I love those things. It's about understanding pressure and how it positions elk. You can kill elk close to roads, absolutely, if you understand how they use security pockets around predictable pressure. And you can go 5 miles in and still fail if you end up exactly where every other motivated hunter goes or you aren't hunting the terrain correctly. The problem isn't effort, the problem is predictability. If your movement, timing, and access all make sense to other hunters, they also make sense to elk. You're losing the wind war a lot of times before the encounter even starts. Most elk hunters think they're losing elk because of one bad wind decision in the moment. But the truth is, a lot of times they lost that encounter long before it ever happened because most hunters treat wind like a tactic, something you check, adjust to, and react to when things get close. Elk don't do that. Elk live by the wind. Every breath they're checking the wind, right? It's not a tactic, it's their entire survival system. They bed where the wind gives them advantage. They travel routes that protect their downwind side. They approach openings and feed zones with built in scent security. And they often circle before committing to calls because that's how they verify danger. So when you blow an elk out, it's usually not because of one wrong step. It's because your entire approach didn't account for how that elk was using the wind before you ever got there. Your access route, your angle, your timing, your setup, all of those things matter in the wind. This is where a lot of elk hunters struggle. They think they're making small mistakes, but actually they're making system level mistakes. You keep trying to create opportunities instead of positioning for them. And this is where everything starts to tighten up. Most elk hunters are trying to make something happen, right? They push in, they call harder, they move faster, they cut distance, they relocate constantly looking for a spark. They're trying to manufacture an opportunity, and I understand that. But elk hunting gets better when you stop forcing moments and you start recognizing where elk have to make decisions. That's the shift right here. Instead of chasing movement, you start hunting decision points. Places where terrain controls how elk move, like side hills that funnel travel, benches that hold beds, saddles that connect basins, pockets that offer security, transition between feed and bedding. This is where movement becomes predictable, and it's where you stop guessing. And this is also where most elk hunters struggle because it requires more patience. It requires sitting down, committing to a position, and letting the structure help you and do the work. Not every situation calls for movement. Some call for discipline. Because the truth is, a lot of elk hunters aren't just one tactic away, they're one position shift away. You reset every day instead of stacking information. And that's one of the biggest reasons elk hunters stay inconsistent. They treat every day like a brand new hunt. They start over every single morning. New plan, new area, new assumptions, or even same plan, same area, but new assumptions, right? Or they're just not adjusting. They might even be leaving behind the most valuable thing they had, information about an area. What happened yesterday matters, right? Where you bumped elk matters. What time it happened absolutely matters. How they reacted absolutely matters. Even silence tells you something. If you didn't hear or see elk in an area that should hold them, that doesn't mean they're gone. It usually means your timing is off. Your position might be wrong or pressure has shifted their movement, right? Elk don't disappear, they adjust. And mature elk hunters understand that. They don't reset, they build from one day to the next and one interaction to the next. They take what the mountain gave them the day before, the moment before, and they refine it. They adjust timing, they shift position, they narrow down movement, they stack small pieces of information until patterns start to show up. That's how consistency is built, not by starting over every day, but by staying engaged long enough to understand what's actually happening in your area. The real reason you're struggling to kill elk, this is the truth that ties all this together. You're not struggling because you don't care. You're not struggling because you haven't worked hard enough. You're not struggling because elk are impossible. And you're not one magic tactic away from figuring it out. You're probably struggling because your hunt is built around reactionary hunting instead of structured hunting. You're diagnosing the wrong problem. You might be entering elk country without a real decision framework. You might be hunting sighting, sounds, and sign instead of hunting systems. And that's why it feels inconsistent and random. That's why you can have moments but not results, because moments don't stack, structure does. This is where everything can change for you. You need a system you can run every day in any unit under any condition. Locate the elk, evaluate the setup, the country, the elk positioning, and what they're doing. Then position yourself accordingly to that information, then execute based on all of that, and then adjust, right, wrong, make mental notes, learn from it. That's how you stop guessing. That's how you stop reacting. And that's how you start building consistency. Not by doing more necessarily, but by doing the right things in the right order for the right reasons. Most elk hunters are closer than they think. They're not missing everything, they're just slightly misaligned in the places that matter most. And in elk hunting, small misalignments create big results. That's why it feels like you're doing a lot right, but not getting it done. So stop asking, what tactic am I missing? That question keeps you stuck chasing answers that don't fix the real problem. Start asking, what part of the system am I misunderstanding? Because when you fix the system, everything starts to fall into place. Your decisions are going to get cleaner, your positioning is going to get sharper, your encounters are going to become more predictable. This isn't about doing more, it's about thinking better and deeper and hunting with structure and aligning your approach with how elk actually live. Elk behavior, that's the key. That's where consistency comes from. And that's where your results are going to change. And that's how you stop guessing and start hunting with more purpose. Now, if you want to go deeper into elk movement, pressure patterns, terrain positioning, and structured decision making, that's exactly why I built the elk hunting series of ebooks. It's a progressive system designed to help you understand how elk actually use country and how to position yourself accordingly. I have a link to those ebooks in the description. If you want hands-on application and real-time breakdowns, we have an in-person Elk Camp 2026 that is built around this same philosophy: structure, preparation, and execution in real terrain. 90% of Elk Camp is going to be running you through specific situations and scenarios. You can check out Elk Camp at backboneunlimited.com. And if you want ongoing access to the Team Backbone community, classroom, my full digital vault of elk resources, private discussions, and direct communication to me for planning, you can join Team Backbone at backboneunlimited.com underneath our membership tab. everything we talk about here is connected. Preparation is not a single video, it's a system. Thanks for being here. Until next time, train harder, hunt smarter, and never settle.